people. Thinking maybe my music is a little loud. I don't know, I need to know on the balance, I guess, if it's too loud or anything like that. It's always hard for me to tell. But hello? Let's see. I feel like the last time I tried to do this, it was October 1st, and now it's already the 9th, which is absolutely insane. So I hope your October is off to a good start. And I'm wearing a blanket because for some reason I'm cold, even though I don't think it's that cold outside. 64 is what my phone says, and I'm not sure how accurate that is. So the last time I tried to do this, we had major difficulties. Making sure that's working. I haven't dropped any frames, knock on wood. Major technical difficulties. And we started chapter 10, but it we didn't get very far. So I was just gonna start chapter 10 over. And see how far we can get today. We didn't get very far last time. So, I don't even know how to count to 10. Yes, you do, because you apparently know how to count to like 42 or something, since that's how old you are. Okay, so I will get started on chapter 10. It's called Search for a Bride. Got my water. There you go. Do you see Sesame now? It worked! Well, that's good, right? Doesn't even know my claimed age? Is it not 42? Is it 46? Do I even know your real age? I think I know your real age, but I don't... Now I can't remember. I know it's not 46 or however old you claim. Okay, gonna go ahead and get started. That's weird. Henrik. Honey, you can't use that emote because you're not a sub. That's what that's about. That's why it doesn't show up on yours when you type that. Yeah. So you have to be a sub. And you only subbed like once, so you're not a sub anymore, honey. I don't know if the camera is straight. Okay. That should be fine. Alright. It's starting to snow, Bess remarked as a few flakes hit the windshield of Nancy's convertible. Before leaving home, she had put the top up because the day was cloudy and raw with a hint of stormy weather. Bess went on, "Oh, I hope it won't be bad. Nancy, does this car have snow tires?" Before Nancy could reply, George spoke up. "Bess, you have so little faith in people. Of course Nancy would have snow tires, and good ones at that." Her cousin defended herself quickly. "After working with Nancy on all the mysteries she's asked us to help her solve, you know even the smartest people can be forgetful sometimes." Nancy laughed. "You girls have driven with me in snowstorms many times. Nevertheless, I promise to be careful." "Oh, it's getting to be worse fast." Due to the storm, it took longer to get to Ridgefield than Nancy had hoped, but she was buoyed up by an exciting thought. Soon she would either come face to face with Edgar Nixon or find out whether or not he was married. When the girls arrived on the outskirts of Ridgefield, the snow was deep. Nancy asked directions to Harrison Street. She found it blocked off by a snow removal machine which it stalled. Nancy turned down a hill and parked near the front of it. The three girls climbed back up, turned right on Harrison Street, and trudged along the unshoveled sidewalk. Finally, they came to Mrs. Himmer's guest house. By this time, the girls were covered with snow. Before stepping onto the porch, they brushed off what snow they could and stamped their boots. Nancy rang the bell. In a minute, it was answered by a plain-looking woman in her 60s. She looked surprised to see the three callers. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "You lost or just cold?" The girl smiled and Nancy replied, "We're all right. We had to park on the next street, so we got covered with snow walking up here. Is Mr. Edgar Nixon at home?" "Why, no," Mrs. Himmer answered. "What do you want to see him about?" When will he be back?" Nancy replied, deliberately evading the woman's question. Mrs. Himmer surveyed her callers from head to toe before saying, "You look like nice, honest young ladies. The answer is that Edgar Nixon moved out this morning." "Oh!" the three girls chorused. "Did you know ahead of time he was going?" Nancy queried. "No, I didn't," the woman said. "He never hinted at such a thing. As a matter of fact, he seemed quite happy here. But then, I suppose when you inherit money, you want to move to better quarters." The girls tried not to show their excitement at this statement. Nancy said nonchalantly, "So Edgar inherited some money?" Mrs. Himmer became more talkative. "It's kind of cold for me standing here. Won't you come inside?" Nancy and her friends followed the woman. She led them to her living room, which was cheerful despite the dull day. "Mr. Nixon didn't say where the money was coming from," Mrs. Himmer went on. "But he told me it was a big sum, and now he was going to change his type of work." "What sort of work did he do?" George asked. "That I don't know," the woman replied. Mr. Nixon was kind of mysterious about his affairs, but I suspect he was in some mail order business. He received lots of letters. Nancy could see her excellent clue fast petering out. No doubt Edgar would have notified the post office already of his change of address. Finally, Nancy asked the question that was uppermost in her mind. "Did Edgar Nixon say he was going to be married, Mrs. Himmer?" "Not this morning, he didn't," the woman said, "but he mentioned it yesterday." "I suppose he was pretty excited about it," Nancy remarked, trying hard not to show her rising excitement. "Who's the young lady?" Mrs. Himmer said he had not mentioned her name. "But I suppose she was the one who came here this morning." The three girls looked at one another. Before they had a chance to ask anything about her, Mrs. Himmer went on, "To tell you the truth, I don't think it was very polite of Mr. Nixon not to introduce her to me. I went to the door and let her in. He came rushing down the stairs with his 2 suitcases and said, 'Let's go.'" Nancy heaved a sigh, but tried not to reveal her great disappointment. "I'm sure she's the person we're trying to find. Too bad you didn't learn her name. Can you tell us anything about her?" "I didn't pay particular attention," Mrs. Himmer answered. "She was tall and all bundled up in fur. I did notice, though, that she spoke with a British accent." Now there was no doubt in Nancy's mind that that person who had come to the house was Nancy Smith Drew. Her heart sank as she thought that by this time she and Edgar Nixon might be husband and wife. "We must go," Nancy said. "Thank you for all the time you've given us." She smiled. Don't be surprised if we come back and call on you again." "Glad to see you any time," the woman told her. Why? She doesn't even know her. As the girls trudged up the snowy street, Bess said, "Do you plan to do any more sleuthing in Ridgefield?" "I'm going to the town hall and see if Edgar Nixon took out a marriage license," Nancy told her. Through inquiries, she learned that the building was not far away, so the girls decided to walk there. They were told that no marriage license had been issued to the couple. "They could have been married almost any place," Bess spoke up. "Trying to get that information would be like hunting for a needle in a haystack." Nancy turned back to the clerk and said, "Do you have a justice of the peace in this town?" "Yes, we do. He has an office on the 2nd floor." Nancy thanked the clerk and motioned for the girls to follow her up the stairs. The justice of the peace was a short, rotund man with a jolly look. He seemed amused by Nancy's inquiry. She guessed that he was thinking, "This girl's disappointed about losing her fiancé and is trying to find out about his elopement with someone else." "I haven't married anybody for a month," the justice of the peace said, "and never anyone named Edgar Nixon or Nancy Drew." He suggested that one of the clergymen in town might have performed the ceremony. "Suppose I give you a list," he said, "and you can go around and find out for yourself." He opened a drawer and pulled out a pad. In a few moments he had written out a rather long list. "I appreciate this," Nancy said. "Because of the storm, I don't think I'll try visiting all these people." The justice of the peace told her there was a pay telephone booth in the main lobby of the building. "You'll keep drier if you try calling up instead of going out in the snow." Nancy agreed, thanked the man for his help, and went downstairs with the girls. They pooled their coins and took turns dialing the names on the list. Fortunately, all the men were at home, but said that they had not performed any marriage ceremony for a couple of weeks. Furthermore, they had no requests for any during the next week. When Nancy completed the last call, Bess remarked, "Nancy, you look pretty downcast. This trip in the snow is all for nothing." George tried to cheer up her friend. "I have a suggestion. Why don't we go back to Mrs. Hemmer's and ask if she would mind our looking for clues in Edgar's room?" Nancy thought it was an excellent idea, and once more the girls plowed through the snowy streets to the guest house. "You're back?" the woman remarked. "Wouldn't your car start?" "To tell the truth, I haven't tried it," Nancy answered. "Mrs. Hemmer, it's very important that I locate Edgar Nixon as soon as possible. We girls thought possibly he left some clue to his whereabouts in his room." "I don't mind you looking around one bit," the woman said. "As a matter of fact, I'm very glad you came back. Several registered letters came in from Mr. Nixon right after you left. Out of force of habit, I signed for them. After the mail carrier left, I realized that I didn't know where to send the letters. Then I suddenly remembered something. Did you tell me before that your name is Nancy Drew and that you come from River Heights?" "That's right." "Did you ever hear of a man named Ira Nixon who lives there?" Nancy smiled. "He's our mail carrier. As a matter of fact, he's a brother of Edgar." "I know that," Mrs. Hemmer said. "Maybe you could help me out with these letters. Some time ago, Mr. Nixon said to me, 'In case of an emergency, get in touch with my brother Ira in River Heights.'" The three girls were watching Mrs. Hemmer intently. What would she reveal next? The woman went on. "If you could just prove to me that you're Nancy Drew from River Heights, I'd give you these letters to take to his brother." Nancy showed her driver's license, but said, "Suppose I give you Ira Nixon's telephone number. You can dial it and tell him I'm here." The woman asked Nancy to make the call, and she would talk with Ira Nixon. After a short delay, Ira Nixon came on the line. Nancy identified herself, told where she was, and introduced Mrs. Hemmer. "You take it now," she said, handing the woman the phone. Mrs. Hemmer told him the story, and he verified the fact that Nancy was really Nancy Drew from River Heights, and that he had known her since she was a little girl. "Your brother Edgar has moved away from here," she said. "He told me that in an emergency I should get in touch with you. I think these letters should be turned over to you. Shall I give them to Nancy Drew?" "By all means," the girls heard him reply. "Nancy Drew is one of the most reliable persons I've ever met, and she's trying to help me solve a mystery. Mrs. Hemmer," he asked suddenly, "you never had any reason to think my brother isn't perfectly honest?" "Oh, no," the woman answered. "He always paid his rent on time and came and went without any trouble to me. Of course, he never told me much about himself, but then it's just as well not to have too much talk between a guest house owner and her roomers." The bundle of letters proved to be too big for Nancy's purse, or even coat pocket. Since it had stopped snowing, she decided it would be all right for her to carry them in her hand as far as the car. Before leaving, the three girls searched Edgar's room, but found no clues to where he had gone. Finally, they said goodbye to Mrs. Hemmer and hurried down Harrison Street. When they reached the street on which the convertible was parked, Bess suggested it would be easier to walk down the hill in the middle of the street rather than on the sidewalk. They had hardly started when a boy on a sled whizzed around the corner. The next second, he skidded into Nancy. The impact knocked her sprawling into the snow. The bundle of letters flew from her hand and scattered in every direction. Twix got to go out. That's good. Did she have a good time going out? But he was really just thinking about lunch. It is 12:30. Lucky for them that people stopped getting married for a while. That boy on the sled was drunk and evil. That seems a little drastic. Is everything okay? Like, is the music okay? Stream's okay? Not having any issues? You're right, the boy was just drunk. I hope not. I don't condone underage drinking. All audio and video seems to be chugging along well. Okay, that's good. Thank you. And be at good levels. Okay. Okay. Actually, there might be some echo on the music, so from my headphones. Only issues, we'll need to put the mic back on a boom stand to limit clicks and taps on the desk. Yeah. Yeah. There's some other things. Like, I don't know why my alerts just echo. But I don't know if that's something we are in control of. Okay, on to chapter 11, The Strange Messages. Bess and George rushed to Nancy's aid. They helped her up and asked solicitously if she were hurt. Nancy smiled ruefully. Mostly my feelings. Thanks, honey. Thanks for the bit. You've cheered 114 bits. Did it echo? I don't know, because I'm not, like, listening to the audio, so. Mostly my feelings, she said with a wry smile. My leg does hurt a little, though. I'd like to sit down. The girls assisted her to the porch of a house where the steps had been cleared of snow. Nancy sat down and rubbed the bruise on her leg. Bess and George looked at each other. Nancy was very white, and they kept asking her over and over again how she really felt and should they take her to a doctor. Oh no, she replied. I'll be all right in a minute. You girls had better go pick up those letters. They're getting soaked in the snow. As the cousins started for the street, several children on sleds came speeding down the hill. They ran over the letters, burying them deeper and mutilating them. Bess and George hurried to pick them up. The girls returned to the porch, and Nancy stared at the letters in dismay. Some of them were open, others were torn, and two had the contents sticking out. Oh look, George exclaimed. This letter has money in it. Wow, $25! She handed the envelope to Nancy, who immediately looked for a return address. There was none. Maybe there's one on the letter inside, she suggested. I'm going to look and see, Bess declared, and began to read the already opened letter. They're really being sure not to, like, commit a felony here by opening somebody's mail. In a moment, a broad grin spread across her face. Listen to this. Dear Guide, I am so excited at the thought that I'm soon to meet the man of my dreams. I can hardly work. Please don't keep me waiting. Mildred. Now Bess's amusement turned to a serious mood. We might be all wrong about Nancy Smith Drew, she said. Maybe Edgar is going to marry this person Mildred. Is there an address on the letter? Nancy asked. No. George remarked, What puzzles me is why $25 is in the letter. Pretty soft. If Edgar can get $25 out of his future bride. Where was the letter mailed? Nancy asked. Dorset. Bess looked at Nancy. You think maybe Edgar went to Dorset to marry Mildred? Nancy smiled. Perhaps. Are there any more open letters with money in them? George looked through the dirty, rumpled mail. Yes, here's another. And there's $25 in it. Nancy asked her to read the letter, saying, I'm beginning to be suspicious of something. I'll tell you in a minute. Dear Guide, I am so thrilled. It won't be long before I'll be in the arms of the man fate has sent me. I'm counting the hours. Martha. There was no return address on either the letter or the envelope. What is your suspicion, Nancy? Bess asked. That Edgar Nixon is a bigamist? Or even a trigamist? More likely, George put in, he promises for sums of money to marry a whole bunch of women, and when things get too hot, he just skips out. This time, with Nancy learning too much about him, he had to leave before he had a chance to pick up the last bunch of letters. I'll bet there's $25 in every one of these. Shall we find out? Bess asked eagerly. Nancy shook her head. To read an open or half-open letter is one thing, but to open the whole thing and snoop inside is illegal. Can't do anything illegal in a Nancy Drew book. Nancy, you haven't told us your theory yet, George reminded her. The girl detective laughed. She said teasingly, I haven't had a chance. I suspect that Edgar Nixon has been running a Lonely Hearts Club and gets money for promising to find a husband or a wife for the person who is foolish enough to put his or her trust in Edgar. George snorted. Do you think the silly people believe they're going to get a mate for $25? Oh no, Nancy replied. I would judge that the whole thing is done on an installment plan. These two letters which we have read are probably the last installment. So that's why Edgar had to skip out, Bess suggested, and Nancy nodded. The scheme is positively revolting, George exclaimed. And more than that, Bess said, it's heartbreaking. A Lonely Hearts Club turned into a Hopeless Hearts Club. George had several uncomplimentary things to say about Edgar Nixon. Then suddenly she paused in the middle of a sentence. Her eyes flashed. Do you suppose Nancy Smith Drew is one of Edgar's victims? Bess said, if she is and he didn't intend to marry her, why did Edgar let her come here? Nancy looked thoughtful. I still think he intends to marry her. He knows about the inheritance, but she doesn't, and he isn't going to let her find out until after they're married. Then through some clever scheme, he plans to get the money away from her. We mustn't let him do that, Bess cried. George looked hard at her cousin. And just how can we stop him? We don't know where he is. Miss Drew came here and went away with him and what else? Bess asked her, a bit miffed by George's gruffness. Her cousin did not answer, but said, Nancy, what do you intend to do with these letters? Are you still going to take them to Ira Nixon? Nancy shook her head. I don't think that would be wise. In the first place, the poor old man would probably collapse again. I'd hate to be responsible for that. If his brother is a swindler, I feel that the authorities should inform Ira, not me. The other girls agreed. I think we should go at once to the postmaster here and explain everything. Will you tell him your suspicions about the Lonely Hearts Club? Bess questioned. I think I will, Nancy answered. Even if I'm wrong, it won't hurt for the post office to make an investigation. Men don't just disappear without leaving any forwarding address unless they have something to hide. Nancy declared that she felt much better now. She got up and trudged down the hill with the girls to her car. She inquired from some children where the post office was and drove directly there. Unfortunately, the building was closed. Now what? George asked. Don't tell me we have to stay in this town all night. Bess grinned. I'm sure Mrs. Himmer would be glad to accommodate us in Edgar's vacated room. The other girls laughed. Then Nancy replied, Since the letters were entrusted to my care, I'll take them home and tomorrow morning take them to the River Heights post office. It was late by the time the girls reached River Heights. Nancy took her friends home, then started for her own house. She was eager to tell her father and Hannah Gruen the latest developments in the mystery. Nancy was mulling over the case as she turned into the Drews' driveway. One thing was a complete puzzle, the part about the American Detective Agency getting in touch with Malmesbury and Bates Jones in London. She put the car away and walked slowly toward the kitchen door. Just before she reached it, a startling idea came to her. Could Edgar Nixon, to throw suspicion from himself, have gone to a shady detective agency and said he knew where the missing Nancy Smith Drew was? He could have asked them to contact Malmesbury and Bates Jones. Then his own unsavory schemes would never be suspected. End of chapter 11. My leg hurts. I'm suing that drunk child for sledding while under the influence. Hot weather is bleh. That's very true. That's illegal. Now let's go break into a house and get to the bottom of things. You leave without any forwarding address because you just forget. I think what we're going to do this year is probably send out our Christmas letter early. Uh-oh. Sorry, I'm watching my frames very closely here. Yeah, I think we're gonna send out our Christmas letter early and just put our new address on that so everybody has it before Christmas time. I like how they think $25 is a lot. Want to send it out tomorrow? No? Not really. Why would you say tomorrow? That's not in my immediate plan. I need to finish laundry and stuff. Because tomorrow is early. No, like November. Early December, maybe. Doofus. Okay. Let's continue on. No, not sending it out Thursday. Don't encourage him, Terry. Oh, do you see my Splatoon stickers? It's not focusing, but... Okay, chapter 12, A Fresh Puzzle. Mr. Drew was waiting for Nancy in the kitchen, and she thought she detected relief in his expression. Dad, were you worried about me? I certainly was. The storm didn't hit us very much, but I heard on the radio it was heavy over in Ridgefield. It was, and this accounts for a few adventures I had, she said. Hannah Gruen, vigorously whipping potatoes in a pot, turned with questioning eyes. Were you in an accident with a car? Did you get hurt? Only a little, but not with the car. I have a few bruises on one leg where a boy on a sled ran into me. Don't worry, she added, as the housekeeper stopped her dinner preparations and came over to examine the injury. If it hadn't been for the sled, the letters wouldn't have opened, and we wouldn't have found the money in them, nor known that Edgar Nixon is probably running a Lonely Hearts Club. Mr. Drew held up his hand to interrupt. For Pete's sake, Nancy, he said, please take off your heavy clothes, and we'll sit down at the table. Then you can tell your story from beginning to end. It sounds interesting. Mrs. Gruen had prepared a delicious roast beef dinner, which they all enjoyed. During the meal, Nancy told about her adventures. The others were amazed and agreed that no doubt her conclusions about Edgar Nixon were correct. Mr. Drew approved the idea of the letters being taken to their local postal inspector first thing in the morning. But you'll have to tell Ira. Suppose you say how the letters got damaged, and you thought the post office should have them. All right, Dad, that should satisfy him. I certainly don't want to hurt poor Ira at this time. Nancy asked her father if any further word had come from Mr. Bates Jones in London. Her father shook his head. In a way, Mr. Drew added, I'm glad there is no news. Tomorrow you and Bess and George go to Emerson, don't you? Yes, Dad. I expect it will be an exciting weekend. Well, I want you to enjoy it and not have the mystery on your mind. There's something in the evening paper that I think will interest you," Mr. Drew added as they all rose from the table. He went to get the newspaper and turned to the sports section. He pointed at a headline which made Nancy's heart skip a beat. It said, "Emerson counts on Nickerson toe." The article went on to tell of Ned's prowess at punting and kicking field goals. I never saw Ned as a football player. I think that's just weird. Nancy felt very proud to be his guest. "It ought to be a great game," Mr. Drew remarked. "Wish I could be there, but you'll have to tell me all about it on Monday." The lawyer went for his coat and said he was going out to bowl with some friends. After he had gone, Nancy started to help Hannah tidy the dining room and kitchen, but the housekeeper urged her to go upstairs and pack. "There's not much to do here," she told Nancy. "You'll have to get up early if you're going to stop at the post office, and then pick up George and Bess. It's a long drive to Emerson, and you'll want time to change your clothes before the play. It's tomorrow night, isn't it?" "Yes, and I hope to meet Nancy Smith Drew face to face. You know, Hannah, it is just possible that Edgar Nixon may have gone to Emerson with her. Oh, I only hope that they won't be married before they get there, and I can try to prevent the wedding." Nancy had just started her packing when she heard the doorbell ring. In a few seconds, she became aware that the housekeeper was arguing with someone. Then Hannah grew and climbed the stairs and poked her head into the doorway of Nancy's room. "It's that pest again," she said with a sigh. "I told her to go away because you were very busy, but she's insistent and won't budge until she has seen you." Nancy smiled. "You mean Mrs. Skeets?" "Yes. What will I tell her?" "I guess I'd better talk to her," Nancy said. "You may never get rid of her if I don't find out what she wants." Nancy walked down to the front hall where Mrs. Skeets was standing. The woman was well bundled up, but her stringy hair showed below her hat. "I knew you'd see me," she crowed as Nancy appeared. "What can I do for you?" Nancy queried. "As I told you once before, I don't want nothing except what's mine," Mrs. Skeets said. Nancy suspected the woman was going to ask for additional money and said quickly, "Don't expect anything more from me." "Now, young lady," Mrs. Skeets retorted, shaking a finger at Nancy, "don't get uppity with me, or you may regret it. I came here on an errand of goodwill, I want you to know, but if you don't show proper respect for your elders, and what young folks do these days, I ask you, I'll go away and you'll never learn why I came." Nancy was amused by this tirade, but also curious to know what the errand of goodwill was. "I'm listening." "Well, that's good. Most of the girls today won't listen to their elders. Nope, I'd say the chicks seem to think they can teach the old birds to fly." Mrs. Skeets laughed loudly at her own joke. "As I've said more than once to Mrs. Brant next door, who has 8 young'uns. Mrs. Brant, I said—" Nancy interrupted. "Please tell me why you really came here. I'm very busy upstairs." Mrs. Skeets frowned in an annoyed way, then said, "Well, I came to tell you all the missing letters was mailed back to their owners." Nancy was so surprised she stepped backward. The idea of such a thing happening after all this time left her speechless for the moment. "Ha! I thought that would knock you over," Mrs. Skeets exclaimed. "Now maybe you'll listen to me." Nancy realized that the letters stolen from the Drews had not been returned. She said, "How do you know all the letters were mailed back to the people?" "'Cause I went round and asked everybody in the neighborhood. It all started this way. We got a new mail carrier. This morning he came to our door and handed me 3 letters. The first one I looked at was the electric bill, which was way too high. We're folks for early sleeping, and I never ran no $8 worth of electric last month, and the company's going to hear from me, you can bet." Nancy repressed a smile as Mrs. Skeets went on. "The next letter wasn't a letter at all, but a postcard from an old neighbor of mine in New York, only she lives in Florida now. She bought a house down there several years ago. Looked good then, but it's fallen apart, and ain't worth half what she paid for it. But she hasn't any money, so she lives in it. She says what the rich people find in Florida she can't—" "Oh, Mrs. Skeets, please," Nancy cried in exasperation. "What has all this to do with your being here to see me?" "I'm coming to that," Mrs. Skeets said. "Just give me time. As I was saying, where was I now? See, you made me forget. Oh, yes. The other letter, mind you, was from Joe's sister, and I knew right well she wouldn't write twice a week, even if someone held her hand to guide the pen. And there was the $10 in the letter too, and she wouldn't send me $20 in 1 week anymore, and she'd send me $1 million. So I got an idea and looked at the postmark. Sure enough, just as I suspected, it was stamped twice by the post office here. This will make Ira Nixon very happy, Nancy remarked. The woman pulled $10 from her pocket. I suppose I owe you an apology, but anyhow, here's your $10. Thank you very much, said Nancy. I'm relieved the whole matter is straightened out. She was glad Mrs. Skeets had not asked her whether the Drew mail had also been returned. It would only have led to another long speech. The sailor's wife put her hand on the doorknob, but before turning it, she looked straight at Nancy and with a smirk said, I guess you've had your fun. What do you mean? Nancy demanded. Mrs. Skeets gave a raucous laugh. Oh, I can see how 2 or 3 young girls in this day and age might think it funny to steal poor old mail carriers' letters and hide the whole lot of them from the rightful owners for a day or two. I'm not so blind I can't see through a knothole. Nancy was furious. Mrs. Skeets, you have no right to insinuate such a thing. Neither I nor my friends would be guilty of such a low trick. And the post office wouldn't think it was any joke. We'd be liable. Maybe so, said Mrs. Skeets. She opened the front door with a flourish and stepped onto the porch. I can't help having my thoughts, though, but I won't say anything. Don't think I'm a gossip. Goodbye! She went down the front steps. By this time, Hannah Gruen had joined Nancy. As the suspicious woman walked out of sight down the driveway, the housekeeper remarked, Imagine having to live with such a person. I don't blame Sailor Joe for taking long voyages to get away from her. Nancy burst into laughter, then reminded Mrs. Gruen that Drew's letters had not been returned. I suspect that the thief had planned to steal only our mail, but didn't have much time, and so he took everything. He couldn't guess there was money in Mrs. Skeets' letters, and he wasn't interested in the contents of any others except ours. Mrs. Gruen nodded. This directly involves you in the case. Well, honey, you'd better get back to your packing. Nancy had just finished when Mr. Drew returned. He laughed heartily at the story of Mrs. Skeets, and then said he thought Nancy's theories about the stolen letters were correct. This seems to pinpoint the fact that the mail thief, who was probably Edgar Nixon, was after the letter to my client, which had a large sum of money in it. Whether or not he knew about the message for Nancy Smith Drew is something still to be cleared up. By 8 o'clock the following morning, Nancy was ready to leave the house. Sorry, I saw some frames drop. I'm like paranoid about it now. She had all the letters for Edgar Nixon in a large envelope of her father's, and went with them directly to the postal inspector, Mr. Wernick, who was already at work. He was delighted to hear that most of the mail taken from Ira Nixon had been returned. But we have no lead to the guilty person, he told her. Even that shoe your little friend Tommy gave you must belong to someone else. Shoe prints of Edgar Nixon at Ira's house don't match. Too bad, said Nancy. She told about the letters coming to Edgar Nixon and her suspicions regarding them. When she showed Mr. Wernick the 2 she had read, he stared in amazement. This is very serious, the postal inspector said. I'll run the rest through our x-ray machine to see if there's money in them. End of chapter 12. I'm very sleepy and I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but I splat stickers. I'm using them as a bookmark right now for the Nancy book. I don't want you to have a mystery on your mind. Dad, I always have a mystery on my mind. Oh. I don't know, I just didn't think the football thing fit Ned's personality. The team must be pretty garbage if the big news is, listen how good the guy who kicks the ball away to the other team after they fail to score does. Wow, Nancy, way to just tell the lady to shut up. She's busy. Oh, I think. Sorry. I think I need to go make some tea. So let's take a quick tea break. Make sure my music is set for like 3.5 hours, so we should be fine. Keegan, it's just weird to me that you're here. Oh, I guess you're on lunch, so that's why you're here. You like my voices? Oh. I only had that voice for that lady because they described her as kind of hillbilly, and I guess I'm good at that, which I don't really like that I'm good at that, but anyways, okay, so I'm gonna take a tea break. I'm gonna make some real quick and then come back. Feel free to go to the bathroom, get some water, get a drink, whatever. Join me in the hot, warm, cozy drinks for fall. You like the voices. Okay, well thanks, honey. Okay, I'll be right back. Hello. I have returned with some Irish breakfast tea, and I had to check an email for rehearsal stuff, so. Okay, just making sure the music's still going and everything. Just paranoid about technical difficulties these days. So. Well, hope you've returned from the break with some drinks or something fun too. I don't know what I'm saying. Thank you. Thank you for the welcome back. Welcome back to you too, Terry. Okay, so we're going to continue on chapter 13. Locked in. How long will it take to x-ray the letters? Nancy asked the postal inspector. Mr. Wernick smiled at her. You're thinking you don't have time to wait? You'd better. I have a hunch there are going to be some surprises in those letters, and I'm sure you'll want to know what they are. It won't take long. He summoned one of the technicians on duty and gave him the assignment. We suspect there's money inside each of these, he said. The man was gone only a few minutes. He came back with the x-rays, as well as the letters. I'd say there are bills in every envelope. Probably $25 in each, he reported. Nancy was elated and waited for the postal inspector to comment. He said, I think your idea of a Lonely Hearts Club and money coming in installments is a good one. We'll work on the case from this new angle. And of course, he added with a twinkle in his eye, we'll expect all the help we can get from you. Nancy promised it and said she hoped that before the weekend was over, she might have startling news for him. She did not divulge what it was and soon said goodbye. Oh, the evidence is closing in on Edgar Nixon, she thought. Now if I can only keep Nancy Smith Drew from marrying him, everything will be wonderful. She picked up Bess and George, and as they rode toward Emerson, she told about the information she had received at the post office. The cousins were excited to hear this, but presently Bess said, Between now and the time that you see Nancy Smith Drew at the play, let's talk about something besides the mysteries. I'd hate to meet Dave with my mind full of clues and crooks. George could not resist a gibe at her cousin. Gibe? I don't know which way to say that. That's better than nothing. Bess made a face and changed the subject. There's a quaint-looking tea room ahead. Let's stop there for lunch. It's been a long time since breakfast. Of course, Bess is the one to say that. The others agreed, but Nancy said they must not spend too much time. They ate quickly, and 2 hours later the towers of Emerson College came into view. Nancy drove directly to the Omega Chi Epsilon house, where the girls' dates were on hand to give them a warm welcome. Ned was tall, handsome, and athletic-looking, with wavy dark hair, a ready smile, and brown eyes. I'm glad you made good time, he said, because I want you to tell us all about this mystery business. Dave Evans was blonde, green-eyed, and of rangy build. I don't know what that means. He gazed at Bess fondly. You look stunning in that new suit, he remarked. I like that fur collar. What is it, squirrel? George spoke up. Yep, she shot it on the way up here. Bess withered her cousin with a look. As a matter of fact, it's mink. How's the play coming? Nancy asked Bert Eddleton, a short, blonde, husky young man. He shook his head sadly. Miss Drew hasn't returned yet. I don't know any more about coaching a Shakespearean play than I do about guiding a rocket to the moon. The whole thing's going to be complete flop. Nancy was sorry to hear that the actors had not returned yet. She said she had hoped to see Miss Drew for a short time before the afternoon was over. A short time later, Bert announced that he and Dave would have to leave for a rehearsal. See you after the show, Dave called as the two boys hurried off. That evening, Ned escorted Nancy, Bess, and George to the college theater, which was attached to the large gymnasium. After the audience was seated, one of the students in the drama group stepped in front of the curtain and said he wished to make an announcement. I know all of you are expecting to see a performance of a Shakespearean play. As you have read, the club engaged the services of Miss Smith Drew, a drama coach. Unfortunately, she had a sudden errand out of town and has not returned. Nancy's heart sank. The heiress must have married Edgar Nixon. The announcer went on. Late this afternoon, we fellows decided that it would be impossible to put on the play we had planned, so we have substituted a comedy. It is called The Mix-Up. We have been rehearsing this for some time, planning to present it in the spring. You won't find it so polished as we had hoped, but we trust you'll enjoy it. The good-natured audience clapped enthusiastically. The announcer stepped into the wings, and the curtain opened. The play was well named, and the audience laughed uproariously. The star of the show proved to be Dave. He was so extremely funny, alternately playing a girl and her twin brother, that the audience broke into repeated applause. The mix-up was such a success that Nancy temporarily forgot her mysteries, but she was soon to be reminded of them. As she was walking out of the auditorium, one of Ned's friends spotted her. He called out gaily, "Hi, Nancy Drew!" At once an attractive young woman, walking just ahead of Nancy, turned around and stopped. She smiled at the girl. "You're Nancy Drew?" When Nancy nodded, she went on, "For a moment I thought you might be another Nancy Drew whom I know. As a matter of fact, I thought I saw her here tonight, but she left before I could speak to her." Nancy was excited about this news. "What is this other Nancy Drew's full name?" "Nancy Smith Drew." "Did she ever work for your family?" Nancy queried. "Yes, she did. She was a governess for my brother and me for a few years. She left to become an actress." Nancy looked at the young woman. "Are you, by any chance, Miss Wilson?" "Yes, I am." Nancy explained how she had telephoned to the Wilson home and left a message that if her mother ever heard from Nancy Smith Drew, she was to tell her that an inheritance awaited her in England. "Oh, how marvelous!" Miss Wilson exclaimed. "I've been away at school, and my parents didn't pass along the message." "You said you thought Miss Drew was here tonight?" Nancy asked. "Yes, I'm sure I saw her in the back of the auditorium when I happened to turn around, just before the show started. I left my seat and tried to find her, but couldn't. She went out of the building." People in the theater had started to crowd past the two girls, and now a young man who had been with Miss Wilson came back. After introducing him to Nancy, she told him what they had been talking about. Nancy said, "Possibly this Nancy Smith Drew is still around. She must have come back for some reason, possibly to see the play. Miss Wilson, could you take a few minutes to help me find her, since you know Miss Drew?" "I'll be glad to." Miss Wilson turned to the young man, Frank Doolittle, who Nancy had recognized as one of the star players on the Emerson football squad. Nancy now introduced Ned, then told him, "We'll be right back. Meet you in front of the theater." She and Miss Wilson dashed ahead of the others. Reaching the outside, Miss Wilson suddenly exclaimed, "There goes Miss Drew now!" She pointed to a side door of the gymnasium. The two girls ran like mad, opened the door, and dashed inside. Only a dim light was burning, and they could not see very far ahead, but realized that the corridor turned abruptly. "Miss Drew! Miss Drew!" Miss Wilson called. When no response came, Nancy tried her luck, but received no answer. She and Miss Wilson dashed to the end of the corridor, then turned the corner. They saw no one. "Wherever could she have been going?" Miss Wilson asked. Nancy could only guess. Maybe Miss Drew left some clothes in a locker in one of the rooms, and she wanted to get them now that she apparently has severed her connection with the dramatic club. The two girls went through another door, and this time found themselves at the foot of a flight of metal steps that spiraled both upward and downward. A single unshaded electric bulb illuminated the stairwell feebly. "Up or down?" Marion Wilson asked. "Let's go down first," Nancy answered. "Or let's save time. I'll go down and you go up." When Nancy reached the floor below, she found herself in the furnace room. Sure there would be no lockers here, she turned and scurried up the steps. Miss Wilson was just coming down. "Nothing up there but a big dark room, and the stairs continue to the roof." "Miss Drew must have used another exit," Nancy speculated. "Well, I guess all we can do is leave." At that moment the light went out. "Oh dear!" her companion cried. "They're turning out the lights and locking up!" The two girls dashed along the corridor, feeling the walls until they came to the outer door. Nancy tried to lift the long bar, which opened it, but this would not budge. "We're locked in!" she exclaimed, and began banging on the door with her fist and crying, "Let us out! We're trapped!" There was not a sound from outside. "Whatever will we do?" Marion Wilson asked nervously. "Frankly, I don't know, but let me think a minute." A few A few moments later, Nancy said, "That dark room you saw, were there any windows in it?" "Yes, several." "Maybe we can get out that way," Nancy suggested. The girls groped their way along the corridor and up the spiral stairway. They opened the door to the dark room and made their way toward one of the windows. To their dismay, chicken wire was tacked over it, and the window could not be opened. All the others had been protected the same way. "I wonder which side of the theater this is on," Nancy speculated. "If we could only attract someone's attention." "But how?" Marion Wilson asked. "I guess we'll have to break the glass and yell." "But the chicken wire was put up there so the glass wouldn't get broken," Marianne pointed out. Nancy said she realized this, but hoped that a hard blow would break the wire as well as the glass. She began to feel around the floor with her feet, hoping to locate some heavy object. Presently, she found what felt like a cannonball, but assumed it was a ball used for shot put contests. There was enough light outside for the girls to see anyone going by. As Nancy picked up the metal ball, Marion Wilson exclaimed, "I just saw a car drive up. Nancy Smith Drew got into it." Nancy rushed forward, hoping to break the glass and attract the young woman's attention, but in a second the car was gone. A feeling of exasperation came over her. Suppose no one else came past whose attention she could Suppose no one else came past whose attention she could attract. "Here come a couple boys. Quick, break the glass," Marion cried out. Nancy heaved the ball, and it did the trick. The chicken wire bent, and the glass shattered. Here's a picture. It says, "Let us out, we're trapped," Nancy cried. There is the picture. "They heard it," Marion cried out, jumping up and down hopefully. Together the two girls screamed out, "Ned! Frank!" The boys looked around. "Up here," Nancy called. "We're locked in upstairs in the gym." Ned and Frank gazed upward in astonishment. "How'd you get there?" Frank asked. "It's a long story," Marion replied. "Spooky in here. I don't like it." "We'll have you out in a minute," Ned said. The two boys raced off to find the grounds superintendent so he could open the door. Meanwhile, the girls groped their way down the stairs and were waiting at the door when it was finally opened. "Thanks," they said, locking arms with their dates. "Boy, what were you trying to do?" Frank asked. "Catch up with an actress," said Nancy, chuckling. "You missed a chance for some excitement." An explanation was quickly given. Nancy ended the story with the rueful statement that Nancy Smith Drew had disappeared again. "What? Then Coach was here." "Wait, then Coach was here." "That's a funny one," Frank remarked. I don't get it. I don't understand. "What? Then Coach was here. That's a funny one," Frank remarked. Ned said, "Pretty shabby way to treat the Emerson Drama Club." Nancy suddenly had an idea. "Ned," she said, "let's get my car and go to the place where Nancy Smith Drew lives. Maybe we can still stop her from getting married to Edgar Nixon." The two said goodbye to the other couple and dashed off toward the fraternity house. They had almost reached it when a large rock came whizzing through the air. It was aimed directly at Nancy. End of chapter 13. Welcome back, Terry. I'm not sure if this theory makes any sense, but I have a weird theory that maybe Nancy Smith Drew is actually Edgar Nixon in disguise. And, like, they said, well, I don't know. I don't know if it makes any sense. I wonder if Nancy will catch that rock with her face. Probably not, just judging on how all those other things happen. Alright, chapter 14. Are we ready to go on? She couldn't avoid a drunk sled driver. This is true. Nancy's just really clumsy, okay? You don't have to judge her for that. Okay. Sorry, I feel like the chair keeps getting stuck on the rug. I judge when I want to judge. Sassy Terror. Judge Terror Court, House of Justice. Okay, continuing. Chapter 14, Elusive Niece. Ned had caught a glimpse of the rock coming in Nancy's direction. Instantly, he pulled her down to the pavement, and the stone sailed over the girl's head. It crashed through one of the fraternity house windows. "Oh!" Nancy exclaimed, looking around quickly to see the person who had thrown the rock. Both she and Ned saw a man running toward the parking lot. They dashed after him. Ned soon outdistanced Nancy, and in a final sprint overtook the fellow who was rather shabbily dressed. Ned grabbed hold of the assailant's collar and yanked him around. "What was the big idea?" he said angrily. "You might have harmed my friend badly." "But I didn't, so let me go," the stranger retorted. "I'll do nothing of the kind," Ned snapped. "Suppose you give me an explanation, then I'll decide what to do." By this time, Nancy had joined them. She too demanded to know why the man had acted the way he had, and what his name was. Their captive began to tremble with fright. I really didn't mean no harm, miss," he said. "Please don't make me tell my name. It'll be bad for me." "Why?" Nancy said. "Would you rather tell the police?" "Oh, no, not the police," the man pleaded. "As I said, I didn't hurt you when I threw the stone, so you got no right to hold me. Let me go." Nancy and Ned looked at each other. Legally, the man was right. He could insist that he had not intended to hit Nancy or the window with the stone. "You should pay for repairing the window," Nancy said. "I ain't got no money." "In that case, I guess the police will have to decide what to do," Ned told him. "Please, mister, don't do that. I'll tell you my name. It's Otto Bush. I'm just a no-good guy in this town. I'll tell you the whole story. A smooth-looking guy came up to me down in the village and asked me if I'd like to earn some money." "Yes?" Nancy prodded the man as he paused. "Well, he gave me a few dollars to do a job. He showed me a picture of you, miss, and said when you come home tonight, here at this house, I was to throw a big-sized rock at you and scare you." "Scare me about what?" Nancy queried, staring hard at Otto Bush. The man shrugged. "I don't know. The guy didn't say. I supposed he had something on you." Bush stopped speaking. "Is that all?" Ned asked. "Yeah, now can I go?" Nancy asked for a description of the man and was sure he was Edgar Nixon. He must be getting desperate to try such a villainous method to keep her from trying to solve the mystery about him. Perhaps he had found out she had taken the letters for his Lonely Hearts Club to the postal inspector in River Heights. Ned let go of his hold on Otto Bush. "I advise you not to be doing errands for people you don't know. How much did the man pay you for this job?" $25. "That's pretty high pay for throwing one stone," Ned remarked. "Suppose you turn over some of it to me to have a new window put in our fraternity house." Otto was reluctant to do this, but seeing the determined look in the husky football player's eyes, he changed his mind and handed over $5. Then, quick as a ferret, he dashed off among the cars. "We may as well let him go," said Nancy. "What a night," Ned remarked. "Nancy, you must be dead tired. Why don't you go to bed and let me pick you up early in the morning to go to the house where Miss Nancy Smith Drew has been living?" When Nancy demurred, he added, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll drive past the place myself. If there's a light in the house, I'll ring the bell. If the elusive heiress is home, I'll have her telephone you." I guess, Nancy mused, that the man who left the money to his niece had no idea she would be so hard to find. Nancy suddenly realized she was extremely weary and consented to the arrangement. She waited up for half an hour, but no phone call came, and finally she went to bed. True to his word, Ned was ready by 8:30 the next morning to take her to Mrs. Roderick's guest house on Linden Road. The owner was a pleasant, middle-aged woman, and her house looked immaculate. "Miss Drew?" she said when asked about her guest. "She slept here last night, but she has already gone out." The woman smiled. "She is busy buying a trousseau." Nancy asked quickly, "Is she wearing a wedding ring?" Mrs. Roderick laughed. "No, but after that little trip she just made, Miss Drew returned with a beautiful engagement ring." "When will she be back?" Nancy inquired, trying not to show her mounting excitement. "She didn't say. Miss Drew was carrying a suitcase, and I expect she planned to do a lot of shopping and fill it up." Nancy and Ed exchanged glances. Was it possible the actress would not return? At once, Mrs. Roderick asked, "Is something the matter?" "I don't know," Nancy replied. "I have been trying hard to find Miss Drew, because I have a very important message for her. I can't reveal everything, but when your Miss Drew returns, tell her another Nancy Drew was here, and must speak to her at once. Above all, she mustn't get married until I talk to her." Mrs. Roderick started in surprise. "You mean there's something the matter with the man she's going to marry?" Nancy said she preferred not to say anything more. "But, Mrs. Roderick, please be sure to have Miss Drew get in touch with me at the Chi Omega Epsilon house." The woman stared in bafflement. "I assure you, Miss Drew is a lovely person. Surely she would not be doing something underhanded." "Oh, I'm not accusing her of doing anything underhanded," Nancy replied, "but she may be doing something too hastily." She and Ned decided to leave before Mrs. Roderick could think of any further questions. Nancy thanked her, asked the woman to give Miss Drew the message, and hurried back to the convertible. As they drove into the campus, Ned headed the car for the gymnasium. That's a weird sentence. "I'm due to report," he said. "I'll see you after the game." Nancy patted his arm and wished him all kinds of good luck. "I'll be rooting for you at the top of my lungs," she added as he grinned and got out of the car. She slid over to the driver's seat and turned in the direction of the fraternity house. Suddenly, Nancy had a hunch and took a road that led to the town hall. She rushed inside and up to the marriage license bureau. The clerk on duty smiled when she eagerly asked if a Nancy Smith Drew had obtained a license recently. "No, guess you'll have to try some other town around here if you want to find her. Is she a friend of yours?" "Sort of," Nancy replied. "Anyway, I must find Miss Drew. If by any chance she should come here, tell her another Nancy Drew at the Chi Omega Epsilon house simply must see her before she gets married." The clerk blinked. "Sounds like a mystery thriller," he remarked. Nancy did not comment. After thanking him, she dashed from the building and hurried to her car. On her way once more, Nancy mulled over the case. "I have a strong hunch Miss Drew isn't going back to Mrs. Roderick's, at least not for a while. Just suppose Edgar Nixon has thought out a whole new scheme to escape being caught. Now what could it be?" Nancy discarded many theories, then one popped into her mind that she felt was worth pursuing. "It's just possible Edgar plans to take his bridge to London." Oh, bride to London. Sorry, not bridge. Then, as if quite by accident, she'll learn of her inheritance. He'll see to it that she doesn't find out in the United States. She parked the car and entered the fraternity house. Nearly everyone was out and no one was using the telephone. "I think I'll call up all the overseas airlines leaving from New York." She got the list of numbers from information and then began calling. Between long waits due either to busy lines or the reservation clerks having to look up the information, half an hour went with no luck. "Well, here goes for the last one," Nancy sighed as she dialed the number. In a few minutes, a pleasant voice answered. Nancy put the same question. "Have you a reservation for today or someday soon for a Mr. and Mrs. Edgar Nixon, or Mr. Nixon and Miss Nancy Smith Drew?" "Just a minute." The reservations girl came back on the wire. "Hello? Yes, they leave on..." The connection was suddenly cut off. End of chapter 14. Welcome for joining, CJ. Thank you for listening intently. I feel Sassing the Detective series that always insists everybody playing as a sassy detective only feels right. I just throw stones willy-nilly, right? We might as well let him go. Well, yeah, he already fled. Also claps, but in a different color. Welcome for clapping. Here. I'm clapping more too. We're all just clapping. See how enthusiastic that was? So pretty. How are you, CJ? I don't know if I asked you how you are, Terry. I asked how your day was going, but how are you? So how are you guys? Just trying to see, I should probably pay attention to how many pages we have. 174, and we are on 124. Okay. I'm all ready. You woke up very, very late. That's okay. Sleeping in is good. I'm good. I'm pretty good. I had a really good weekend, so. And I guess it's Tuesday, but yesterday was good too, so. But I'm sleepy, because for some reason I went to bed at 3, and my eyes twitching. Twitching on Twitch. Ha, ha, get it? Alrighty dighty, as they say. Okay. You don't get it. Uh-huh. Maybe... Let's see. I think I'm gonna try to read 2 more chapters, and then we'll call it good. And then the next read stream, we will try to finish. Tea looks good. It is good. It's Irish breakfast tea. Please explain it to me in great detail. I don't even know what I said anymore, Terry. You should get some tea, CJ. So we're gonna start chapter 15. And I have bug bites on my ankle that are very itchy. And that is what it sounds like. Okay, you guys ready for chapter 15? It's called A Worse Mix-Up. I'm too lazy to put a tea bag in a mug. Too much effort. Well, if I were there, I would do it for you, CJ. That's how much I care. What kind of tea do you like? Okay, here we go. Though Nancy tried over and over again to call the airline back, the wire continued to be busy. Oh, phooey, she said to herself impatiently. Suddenly, Nancy realized that she still did not know if the reservation was for Mr. and Mrs. Edgar Nixon, or for Edgar and Nancy Smith Drew. Also, she had not found out whether or not they were going to London, nor on what day they were flying. Before trying the airline again, Nancy had to relinquish the phone to several students who wanted to make calls. Soon the fraternity house held a mob of chattering, laughing boys and girls. Even if Nancy could have made the connection, she would not she would not have heard what was being said at the other end of the line. Bess and George came running up to her. "Nancy, we've been looking all over for you. It's almost lunchtime," said Bess. "My, you look as if you're in the doldrums instead of having fun. What's the matter?" Nancy brought her friends up to date on the latest clue. "Well, here goes one more try for the airline. The cousins could tell by the expression on Nancy's face that the line was still busy. Finally, George said, "If Miss Drew didn't tell Mrs. Roderick she was going away, she's probably coming back, so you can talk to her later. Come on. Time to eat, and then we'll have to hurry off to the game." Nancy was torn between two desires. She hated to give up her pursuit of the other Nancy Drew. On the other hand, she would not miss seeing Ned play in this big and final game of the football season for anything. At that instant, the telephone rang and Nancy answered it. "Chi Omega Epsilon House?" a young woman's voice asked. "Yes. I'd like to speak to Nancy Drew." "You're talking to her. Is this Marion Wilson?" "Yes. Nancy, I'm so glad I got you before you left." "Any news about Miss Drew?" Nancy asked her. "No, I haven't seen her. I drove around town thinking I might get a glimpse of her, but she wasn't in sight." Marion Wilson said she had a request to make. "Since both Ned and Frank are playing, how about you and I attending the game together?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," said Nancy. "You know, there's just an outside chance that Nancy Smith Drew may be there, and you can spot her." It was arranged that Marion was to come over to the fraternity house directly after lunch and go to the game with the girls. Dave and Bert, who were on the second string team, had left already for the stadium. An hour later, just as Nancy was about to leave the house with the group, a telephone call came from her father. "You must have something important to tell me," she said quickly. "I have tracked down the firm which offered to present Nancy Smith Drew so she can..." That's weird. "So she can claim her inheritance." "What kind of agency is it?" his daughter inquired. "A shady outfit, and not to be trusted." Nancy was excited at the news. "Maybe the agency story is a fake, and some imposter is going to appear calling herself Nancy Smith Drew." "That's what Mr. Bates Jones thinks," her father said. She told him all that she had learned the night before and during the morning. "Your clue gives me an idea, Dad. Maybe Edgar Nixon doesn't intend to marry Nancy Smith Drew at all. Instead, he's taking her away to keep her from being found by me." "It's a good guess," the lawyer remarked. "And here's another thing," Nancy went on. "Perhaps Edgar Nixon is already married to somebody else who is in cahoots with him and is going to play the part." Mr. Drew sighed. "This mystery gets to be more mixed up all the while. Well, Nancy, I advise you to forget the whole thing for the afternoon and evening. Enjoy the game and have fun at the dance tonight." Nancy laughed. I don't promise to forget the mystery, but I know how I'll have a marvelous time. Goodbye, Dad. Take care." On the way to the game, Nancy brought her friends up to date on the latest development. Marion Wilson was shocked. "We mustn't let that lovely Miss Drew be swindled," she cried. Beth spoke up. "Nancy is doing everything she can. She's left messages everywhere for Nancy Smith Drew not to get married and to get in touch with her immediately. Now let's concentrate on the game." The girls agreed, and Nancy said no more about the mystery. There was a huge crowd on hand for this important game between Emerson and State University. Vendors stood outside the stadium selling pennants and football pins, and hats, and flowers of the colors of the two colleges. Inside, the bands of both schools were playing. This, together with whistles and high-pitched conversation, made a great din. It turned to thunderous applause and cheers as the two teams trotted onto the field. Nancy and her friends had seats ideally located near the center of the field. They cheered lustily, then quieted as a whistle was blown by the referee, and the captains of the opposing teams met to confer with the officials. "Emerson receives the kick," came the announcement over the loudspeaker. The ball sailed through the air. The game was on. The blue jerseys of State U swept down the field. "Frank's catching it," Marion cried out as the ball came down. After deftly sidestepping a would-be tackler, Frank cut to his left, and with a good block from Ned Nickerson, sped to the 30-yard line before being tackled. Excitement ran high in the stands, packed solid with spectators in red, blue, and green sports clothes. Pennants waved amid the laughter and cheering spectators. "Now watch Ned go," Nancy said. "Come on, Ned, touchdown!" On the playing field, Ned Nickerson realized there was no magic formula for conquering State U. He passed to a halfback who tried an in-sweep. It was good for 3 yards. On the next play, Ned... This description of this football game is boring. I don't care, and I don't follow it, so it means nothing to me. On the next play, Ned faded back to pass, but apparently State U had scouted him well because 2 linebackers came charging through. His toss was rushed and fell short of the receiver. A groan went up from Emerson. Ned himself tried an off-tackle slant, but failed to make the necessary 10 yards. Then he dropped back to punt. The ball soared high and far, giving Emerson defenders plenty of time to race down the field. The State receiver was stopped in his tracks as Emerson fans roared their approval. "Come on, State, sock it to him," came cries from across the field, but State fared no better. They also had a kick out on 4th down. Frank again received the ball, but instead of running with it, he lateraled to Ned. The speedy quarterback dived, ducked, wriggled, and sidestepped as he flew up the field. Stop him! Stop him!" screamed State's rooters. Now there was only one man between Ned and the goal line. The quarterback tried to sidestep him. Slam! With a bone-jarring tackle, Ned was brought to the turf 12 feet short of a 6-pointer. He rose slowly from the ground and limped back into the huddle, but his chest hurt. "You all right?" Frank asked him. "Sure, just shaken up a little. Let's give him the down-and-out pass pattern." When the ball was snapped, Ned rolled back into his left. Emerson's left end faked out the opposing halfback and dashed toward the corner of the field. Ned rifled the pass. It was a perfect pitch. The end caught it in his upstretched arms and fell across the goal line. "Hey! Yay!" Marion exclaimed, jumping up and down and waving her arms wildly. Emerson's stands were a bedlam of noise and motion. Their team led 6-0. "Come on, Ned," Nancy cried out. "Make it 7." She felt confident about Ned's place kicking. The sports writers had praised his toe. Now he would add to their score. As Ned walked back into the huddle, he was still wincing with the pain in his chest. The teams faced each other. State's linemen were poised, ready to spring forward at the snap of the ball. The ball was passed low to Frank. He set it up for the kick. Ned's leg came forward, his toe hit the ball, and sent it sailing into the air as the spectators rose to their feet. There was dead silence for an instant, then a deafening roar. "No good!" The referee's motion indicated that the ball had missed by inches. "That's a shame," Marion said. "What happened to the great Nickerson?" a State fan yelled. "He better go to another college where he can learn how to punt." Nancy was concentrating on Ned. "Oh dear, I hope nothing has happened to him," she said to Marion. "He was limping a little." Suddenly, Nancy's hand flew to her mouth as she stifled a shriek. "Oh no!" Ned Nickerson had collapsed on the green turf. Well, that was funny, because I'm sure CJ enjoyed that. Chapter 15 Hype. I don't really drink tea, so about the only kind I've had is generic basic plain tea. I'm not sure what it's called. I call that tea. Like black tea? Or are you talking about sweet tea? Like, have you had it hot or cold? I don't get detailed because with tea I don't know enough to fake like I'm sophisticated enough to know the different varieties. Sophisticated. I can't even say that. I don't claim to know a whole lot about it. It is something I would love to learn more about because there's so much to learn and there's so many different varieties, but I really like it. Any kind of breakfast tea is like really bold, so it's good for like waking up in the morning. An Irish breakfast tea is really good. I really like it. And I personally don't usually put sugar in my tea or like any sweet stuff. But it also depends on what mood I'm in and like what the flavor is. So this is pretty strong. At least I've had tea before. It's about the only beverage that people get sophisticated about that I've actually had. I don't know anything about wine. I don't like wine. This is The Godfather. You've never had any of it. There you go. I hadn't had any of it until this year. And then I tried it in Ireland for the first time. Ned, I do not care about your football game. Exactly. Welcome for twinning, CJ. Wait, didn't it say Ned was a punter? Yeah, I think so. How do you color clap? Oh, there you go. I don't know, but if they're passing to the kicker, that's... I don't know what's going on. Apparently, Millie, I think Mildred Benson's the one who wrote this one, right? She didn't know anything about football either. Or maybe they had different rules back then. I don't know. What? I'm so confused by this game in which Ned Nickerson is every single position on the football team. Maybe the quarterback shouldn't be kicking. I mean, oh no, Ned, somebody call 911 in a couple hours. Can't you see CJ is deeply concerned? Is not concerned, but is yellow. Oh, okay. Hi, V. Be safe. I'm glad you're off work. Finally, you can go home and rest. I guess it's black tea, like regular Lipton tea bags. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's black tea. I mean, Lipton does probably have a green tea variety, but I think their, like, default is black. So, welcome for joining, V. Okay. So, this is going to be my last chapter for today. It's chapter 16, Mistaken Identity. Mildred must be writing like, I've seen footpath sport before. People would be impressed by how well I know it. Yeah, that's basically, if I were to try writing football, that's basically me. I'd call it footpass. Footpass. But footpass, that sounds more like soccer. Millie's so cute, though. I'm sure she was, like, the cutest woman ever. Okay. Let me get some water. Well, yeah, football sounds more like soccer, too. That's true. That's why, with so many people from different areas, we really just need to specify and say American football. I'm kind of embarrassed that I actually do know stuff about football because I hate it, so I try to make myself more dumb about it. I would probably feel the same way if I were in that position. So I understand what you mean. Okay. Instantly, Frank called out for timeout. Frank called for timeout. The water boy rushed onto the field, followed by the Emerson trainer. Nancy rose from her seat, excused herself as she stepped in front of other spectators, and finally made it to the aisle. Worried, Nancy hastened down the concrete steps toward the field. By the time she reached the railing, Ned was being carried from the field by Frank and the trainer. "Ned! Ned!" she cried out, but he did not hear her as the trainer eased him carefully onto the bench. Players crowded around quickly, and Nancy lost sight of her friend. Marion came to stand at Nancy's side. "I'm sure he'll be all right, honey," she said consolingly. "Ned has been hurt before and always managed to return to the game." Suddenly, Nancy saw Frank walking away from the bench toward the field, where the men were waiting to resume play. "Frank, is he all right?" Nancy cried out. The fullback turned and waved at the two girls, but said nothing. "Come on, let's get back to our seats," Marion said. Nancy only half watched the game. Her mind was on Ned, but nothing spectacular happened. It was a defensive battle with each side gaining a few yards, then being forced to kick to its opponent. During the halftime period, the marching band performed, but the colorful formations were lost on Nancy because she was worried about Ned. But when the players trotted back, she relaxed. Ned was among them. "Oh," she said with a sigh of relief. Ned, however, remained benched. Emerson's defenses could well have used him the 2 periods that followed. State's backfield gained momentum. Finally, they were on the 2-yard line of Emerson. "Hold that line! Hold that line!" Nancy screamed along with the Emerson rooting section. But on the next play, State scored. Now the cry arose, "Block that kick! Block that kick!" That's like 2 chapters of football. That goes down a star rating for me. The teams lined up. Toe met ball. Good! The score stood 7-6 in favor of State U. Nancy and Marion screamed themselves hoarse as the autumn shadows settled over the stadium and a brisk wind began to blow across the field. "Oh dear," Nancy said. "Only 3 minutes left, Marion." The score was still 7-6. The Emerson substitute quarterback was doing a good job but lacked Ned's field generalship. Yeah, I don't know what position Ned plays at this point. The boys tried, but it was obvious to all that they were tiring. At last, Emerson worked the ball down to State's 35-yard line. It was 4th down. "They'll have to kick," Marion said. "Wait, look!" Nancy cried. On the sideline, Ned was trotting back and forth. After a quick word from the coach, he snatched his helmet and put it on as he ran onto the field. "A kick!" the spectators yelled. "Nickerson's going to kick!" As the 2 sides lined up, every spectator in the stadium rose to his feet, cheering. The distance to the goalpost seemed impossible. Ned braced himself. The ball was snapped. Frank placed it down. Thud! The ball arched high and sped through the air. Would it make the crossbar? Would the wind blow it to one side? The answer came in a deafening roar from the Emerson side. Ned had scored! 3 more points went up on the scoreboard. Emerson 9, State U 7. Colored streamers flew down from the stands, and confetti rained over the delirious spectators. "Ned did it!" Nancy screamed. "He won the game!" Minutes later, it was all over. Emerson fans flooded onto the field. They hoisted Ned to their shoulders and carried him to the dressing room. Nancy was waiting by the door as Ned stepped out later. "You were simply magnificent," she said. The next second, Nancy's expression changed completely. Ned noticed it at once. "What's the matter?" "Oh, I don't want to take away any of the glory from the celebration," she said, "but I just saw a man over there who looks like Edgar Nixon." Bert and Dave, who had come out with Ned, offered to dash across to where the man was and detain him until Nancy could get there. "Ned, please wait here," Nancy requested, and sprinted after the 2 boys. But by the time she reached them, the man they had stopped was laughing. Nedgar? I just said Nedgar. Oh my gosh. Nancy heard him say, "No, I'm not Edgar Nixon." Bert turned to introduce Nancy. "This is the young lady who thought you were someone she's looking for." "I'm terribly sorry," she said. "From a distance you looked like a man named Edgar Nixon." The man continued to grin. "You know, twice today I've been mistaken for that person, and both times by very pretty young ladies." Creepy. Nancy blushed as she asked who the other young lady was. The stranger replied, "I don't know her name, but she said she was an actress." Nancy was puzzled. If the person was Nancy Smith Drew and had met Edgar Nixon at the guest house in Ridgefield, surely she would know what he looked like. The man she had detained was saying, "I'd like to meet this double of mine someday." "When did you talk to this actress?" Nancy asked. "Just before the game. She said her date was supposed to meet her here for lunch." "At the hotel. I'm staying there." "Is Mr. Nixon there too?" Dave spoke up. "I don't know." When Ned heard the story, he insisted upon accompanying Nancy downtown and inquiring at the hotel for Edgar Nixon and Nancy Smith Drew. To her disappointment, she found that neither was registered. "If Edgar Nixon is in town, he'll probably be at one of the guest houses or motels," Ned suggested. "Ned," said Nancy quietly, "you were hurt in the game today. Don't you think you ought to go back to your room and rest?" The football player shook his head. "I'm all right now. The wind was knocked out of me, and I got dizzy and faint for a while." "No, I insist upon going with you on this hunt." Nancy beamed at him. "You're certainly a good sport." Ned laughed. "I don't want to lose my girl to some kook. If you do come across Edgar Nixon while you're alone, he may harm you." Nancy and Ned's errand proved to be futile. Neither the suspect nor Nancy Smith Drew was known at any of the places where they asked. To be sure that he was not using an alias, Nancy showed the picture she had borrowed from Ira. In each case, the person she consulted insisted that no one who looked like him had stayed there recently, and most of them did not recall ever having seen him. On their way back to the campus, Nancy said, "Ned, let's stop at Mrs. Roderick's. She may have some word about Miss Drew." Nancy fervently hoped that the actress might even be there. Again, she was disappointed. Mrs. Roderick said that Miss Drew had not returned. She must have filled her suitcase with new clothes and left Emerson. After what you told me, I just haven't been able to stop worrying about Miss Drew. Nancy mentioned the possibility that the actress and the man she planned to marry had left Emerson to go to London. "May I call the airline and find out more about it? I was cut off when talking to them this morning." "Certainly," Mrs. Roderick said. "I only have one phone. It's in the kitchen. Help yourself." This time, Nancy was able to put through a satisfactory call. She learned that a Mr. Edgar Nixon had a reservation on the 9:30 Monday night plane to London. His wife had canceled. "Thank you very much," she said. "Now will you please look and see if you have a reservation for Miss Nancy Smith Drew?" After a few minutes, she was told that the airline did have a reservation for a person by that name. Nancy hung up and walked back to the living room where Mrs. Roderick and Ned were waiting. She reported what she had learned. "The question now is whether this is the Edgar Nixon I'm looking for, and is Nancy Smith Drew the real one, or a person who's going to present herself as the heiress?" Mrs. Roderick shook her head. "What a dreadful mess this is. Well, I hope you're able to settle it." "I'm afraid," said Nancy, "that Edgar Nixon intends to marry the Nancy Smith Drew who will inherit the money, but I'm hoping I can prevent the marriage." "How in the world can you do that?" the woman asked. Ned spoke up with a smile. "I can guess," he said. "It wouldn't surprise me if Nancy intends to take off for New York and stop the couple from flying to London." Nancy giggled. "How well you know me. That's exactly what I have in mind." "Well, I wish you luck," Mrs. Roderick said. "And when you have a chance, do drop me a postcard and tell me how everything comes out." "I'll do that," Nancy promised. She thanked the woman for being so cooperative. It was dark when Nancy and Ned came out of the house. They were pleased it was a clear, crisp evening for the dance. When they reached the fraternity parking lot, it was full. "We'll have to leave your car in the street," Ned remarked. Nancy, who was at the wheel, turned around and headed down the street. Parking was allowed only on one side, and she had to go to the next block before finding a space. Ned teased her by saying he was sure she would never squeeze her convertible in such a tight parking space. However, after several skillful twists of the wheel, Nancy maneuvered the car in the vacant spot. Ned admitted he could not have done a finer job. Nancy locked up the convertible. Then she and Ned started walking on the side of the street where no cars were allowed to be parked. About halfway back to the fraternity house, they suddenly became aware of bright lights behind them. The two turned automatically. To their horror, a car had raced up over the curb and was heading directly at them. End of chapter 16, and that is where we'll leave it. Hey, it's 2 o'clock. And that is good timing. "I'm sure he'll be alright, honey. Ned is now concussed." "Yeah, who knows? My dad did a weekly NFL pool when I was a kid, and he had me participate in it. So I ended up watching football between 3rd and 6th grade. Now I'm ashamed." There was like a time in between there for me too where like I tried to watch it, but it was only for like a couple games and then I gave up. I'll say Emerson needed Ned. He sounded like he played every single position. Now I'm just imagining Frank and Ned are the only 2 players on their team. And it's funny because they chose a guy named Frank, but it's not Frank Hardy. It's just a random guy named Frank. Come on, wind! Drat. Fix. The Mafia is not going to be happy that Ned didn't botch it on purpose. Ned hasn't won anything in his life. I call BS. Welcome for Deirdre. I want to hope Ned gets hit by a car, but then that would endanger Nancy. Oh my gosh. You're just giving him a hard time because of video game Ned. You're okay with book Ned, right? Or am I just totally wrong? I'm still shipping Francie, even though it's random Frank. There you go. Oh my gosh, Lexi's fanfic was so good. I really liked it. Even though I'm not like a Francie shipper, and I just figured out what Francie Drew was. It didn't hit me until just now. Oops. Yeah, I'm slow. All Neds are tainted for me now. Any Ned you meet, you're just like, ugh. Hopefully you never meet a Ned Nickerson in real life. Even Ned Nickerson? Oh wait. I don't necessarily want to quit streaming, but I don't have much ready to play, and I don't know that we have many people to do like Jackbox or anything. I've never met a Ned in real life. I don't know if I have either. Ned Roram. I don't know who that is. What is Ned short for? It's probably short for something, right? Composer. Gotcha. This could be bad. Nedford. Nedgar. Is it really Nedgar, or is that just a joke? I mean, I've been saying Nedgar in this, this book just because there's so many Nancys and Edgarnicks, and does it say non-educated? I think it does. I think it does. Nedgar is what Deirdre calls him in Ash. Yeah, that's right. I haven't played Ash in a long time, and I can't ever remember. Oh. Well, Benedict makes sense. It makes sense for it to be short for Benedict. But Edward and Edwin, that doesn't make sense. Benedict Arnold Nickerson. Well, I don't know when I'm going to stream next. Maybe Thursday. Maybe we'll finish the book on Thursday. And then I can do a poll for our next book. Or, I don't know if I'll do a poll, because I may honestly, now that I have the whole set, I may just go back and read through, you know, the ones that I haven't read yet from the entire series. What do you guys think of that? Would you guys be up for that? Or would you want me to do it like randomly, and then do polls? Or are you okay for me to just like go through the series in order? That would be good. It's weird to watch myself on cast. You should read what you're interested in because they're all equally fine to listen to. There you go. Okay. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting that and my stream. So I'll probably end up doing that just because it's been something I've wanted to do forever, and I like reading it on stream because then I can still read other things off stream, and I usually don't read more than one book at a time, but this way I can kind of do that because I'm dedicated to finishing it, so it will get done, and then I can, you know, read the others on my own time. I hope there's more chapters dedicated entirely to how Ned does everything and what normally would take multiple people. Yeah. Just every kind of sport. We can put him in like volleyball and soccer, and up next Ned plays an entire symphony. Oh my gosh. One part at a time, every instrument. I'm sure that would drive CJ insane. It would probably drive me insane too. Ooh. I don't know if that's a bad ooh or a good ooh. I bet it's terrible. Probably. Okay. Well, yeah, let's just plan on me streaming. Well, let me look at the calendar. I don't think I have anything. Thursday it should be... Oh, I do have a doctor's appointment. But I should be able to make it by noon. So, I'll plan on streaming again at on Thursday at noon to finish Nancy's mysterious letter. And then, you know. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Because, yes, we should talk about pumpkins. I'm not entirely sure, like, how much time I'm gonna have to dedicate to it, and I would feel bad if, like, you do all the work, but I get the credit, because that just seems wrong. But, yeah, we can talk about it. I've always wondered about carving pumpkins, but I feel like I'd be terrible at it. I did it once in school for some weird thing. I don't remember how it turned out. It was when I had a terrible phone in high school, and so I don't remember if I still have those pictures. I might, but they're probably terrible pictures. We'll talk about it and see. Okay. Not like her recognizes CJ anymore, anyhow. He won once before with pumpkins. Yeah, and hey, I think your cookie rant is very justified because that was freaking amazing. And yeah, I don't know how you didn't win. So, I guess they really could have been trying to give somebody else another chance. But still, I mean, if there were like multiple places, you should have won one of the places. I mean, it was so legit. It was ridiculous. And yeah, just that you worked that hard on it. Okay, so I will see you guys on Thursday at noon. I will post it in the Discord, and if I don't see you around before then. This cookie creation was great. Do we know what did win? And before it was just a cookie that had chocolate chips with Indie spelled out on it. I'm just saying even honorable mention would feel like that looked at it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what won, but it would probably make me mad too. Oh. What year was that, CJ? Yeah. I'll go back and look. I can find a photo. Okay. Yeah, send it to us in Discord. Basic biscuits. That sounds like a ballerina thing, because we call our feet biscuits sometimes when they look terrible. So, basic biscuits. Yeah, that sounds perfect. December 2014. Hey, so that was like around the first time that we were all kind of getting to know each other. Pretty sure. No, wait, no. No, it was 2 years after that. I'm sorry. Because it's been 2 years. I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking for some reason it's 2016. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, I won the pumpkin contest in 2013, so I feel like it's been a reasonable time between. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works or how they go about choosing their winners, but yeah, send us a picture. Okay, with that, I will leave you guys because I'll probably go eat some food, work on some stuff. But thank you guys for being here. I really like doing read streams. I may not be the best at it, and sometimes I just have a hard time like with speech, and I think that's just from my childhood though, because I used to have like a lisp. Or I don't know if I actually had a lisp, but they put me in speech therapy after my parents' divorce. No, I had speech therapy in before and after, but it got worse after, of course. You did it marvelously. Thank you, Terry. You're so sweet. I love you guys, and I just feel so lucky to have good friends like you, because I don't know why I'm tearing up right now. I don't know. You guys are just awesome, and I love being friends with you. It's lots of fun being able to poke fun at Ned with y'all. I even enjoy that, and I'm pro Ned and Nancy, so but I don't know, it's not like I don't ship any of them particularly just because it doesn't interest me. The only ships I'm really interested in are like gay ships, so now if we had like George and another lady, then that would be interesting to me, but Keegan, I hate the sound of my own voice though, but if it brings some joy to you guys, I guess, you know, it's worth it. It must be our wonder stink. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, you guys are awesome. And, I need to find a time to play more indie. Keegan, oh, that's what I was going to talk to you about. So, if we don't have anything on Friday night, I gotta check everybody else's streaming schedule. But, Keegan, we should try to do, we should try to stream Nancy Drew and start the game over again. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. So, alright, for the umpteenth time, I'm gonna finish it for real now. So, thank you guys, and I'll see you later. Bye.